everyone, and thanks so much, Staking Summit, for having us. Excited for this fireside chat with Keone from Monad Labs. So, Monad Labs is building the Monad blockchain, which describes itself as the most performant EVM compatible chain. So let's start just by talking about the elements or the innovations that allows Monad to have this high performance.
Yeah, sounds great. Great to be here. Thanks to Adam and the whole Staking Rewards team for having us here. My name's Keone, co-founder and CEO of Monad. Cami, to your question about the major innovations, thank you. Yeah, Monad is really a technology project that is introducing new architecture to the EVM and to Ethereum to enable a much higher level of throughput than what we have right now with existing EVM chains. So there's sort of four major areas that I want to mention really briefly. The first is MonadDB, which is a new database for storing Ethereum Merkle tree data much more efficiently. You can think of it as basically going from log 2 efficiency to log 16 efficiency, just from having the Ethereum Merkle tree natively stored on disk, as opposed to having indirection from storing it inside of another database. The second improvement is optimistic parallel execution. This is enabling a lot of parallel execution while still preserving the same interface as Ethereum right now, where there are no access lists. There's just a block with a bunch of transactions where each transaction is a function call against a smart contract. So no interface changes, which we think is really important for end users. The third improvement is asynchronous execution, basically decoupling the problems of consensus and execution from each other and enabling separate swim lanes for both of those. This is a massive improvement for execution throughput because we're going from using a small fraction of the block time for execution to using the whole block time for execution. And so for context, Ethereum has 12-second block times, but the rough budget for execution is about 100 milliseconds, which is 1% of that 12 seconds. So going from using 1% to using 100% is a massive improvement. And then lastly, there's Monad BFT, which is a really performant consensus mechanism. It's proof of stake. It's a derivative of hot stuff and DM BFT, and it's enabling really performant consensus while also maintaining a high degree of decentralization.
Okay, and then what's the result of all these innovations for the end user? Like, how much improvement will Monad have, or is Monad expected to have versus Ethereum in terms of TPS?
Yeah, I think the cool thing about these different innovations is that they stack on top of each other, and whenever you have orthogonal improvements that can actually stack, that's where you can get really significant speed ups. So in our testing, we've seen well over 10,000 TPS of throughput while testing using Ethereum's history. So basically just replaying the same transactions that we see in recent blocks in Ethereum, at block 18 million or block 19 million, replaying that through the Monad test network, over 10K TPS, which is about 1,000x, maybe a little bit less, like 800x improvement.
So we've been comparing Monad to Ethereum. How does Monad fit in the blockchain ecosystem? Are you placing yourself as an Ethereum competitor?
No, we're not. I think at the end of the day, there's several different completely orthogonal methods to scaling. And one of those is the roll-up scaling mechanism, aka vertical scaling. We've also seen people focusing on raising data availability throughput, or trying to implement forms of dank sharding or sampling-based DA prior to Ethereum's own innovation of implementing dank sharding. That's another vertical, but we really see Monad as another vertical that is completely orthogonal in terms of introducing a new database, introducing optimistic parallel execution, introducing more like software architecture improvements that are internal to the client, as opposed to having the architectural improvements which are related to different systems that are composing on top of each other.
Okay, so This panel is about monolithic chain structure, Ethereum's roadmap, and its execution has been through layer twos as a way to scale. But it sounds like you are proposing scaling through native layer ones, through like monolithic chains. Can you talk about this debate or narrative of scaling through layer twos versus scaling through monolithic chains?
For sure. Yeah, I think it's interesting because the development of any new technology takes a long time, and during that period of development, because it's Web3, we're communicating about the design principles and sharing the high-level architecture and talking about some of these concepts ahead of time, ahead of the mainnet. So I think in a parallel universe, like in the Web2 space, like a team would just go out and build it completely, issue it, or like release it to the world, and start getting more and more customers and users and so on. And then over time, other projects, the other competitors or what have you, like other projects in the space would start to implement some of those ideas. But because we're in the Web3 space, we actually start sharing the ideas ahead of time. And more generally, like Monad is closed source right now. Like you can't just go to our GitHub and look at it, but at the code. But after the mainnet, when the code is open source, then any subsequent development basically just happens out in the open. And so I think the interesting thing is that a lot of these ideas that we're talking about now, like we'll just take one example, asynchronous execution. So this idea of separating consensus and execution and having nodes only come to consensus about the official ordering of transactions and not having the Merkle root of that list of transactions, like the consequent state post those transactions, not having that in the block, right, in that same block. This is an idea that we've proposed and that now is gaining, I think, more and more interest in the Ethereum community. There is an ETH research post about this idea of like trying to delay execution by a little bit so that we can use the full block time for execution as opposed to only a small fraction of it. So I think at the end of the day, regarding Monad's role in the Ethereum research space, my goal, and I think my team's goal, is just to contribute to Ethereum scaling. We want to see some of these architectural improvements that I mentioned making their way back to Ethereum as well. And one way of doing that is by proving it out in the wild and showing that we can get much higher throughput with a fully decentralized layer one blockchain with hundreds of nodes participating in consensus that are fully geographically distributed, like no games around putting all the stake weight in like one region or stuff like that, things that we see happening right now. Prove that this is possible, but then also we want to see some of these changes be reflected in Ethereum as well.
Do you think is the main benefit of scaling through monolithic chains versus layer twos, is it decentralization, basically? Like layer twos right now, most of them have centralized sequencers, and the roadmap is to eventually decentralize them. But essentially, right now, layer twos are relatively centralized versus what a layer one can bring. It seems like what you're pointing towards, like that's essentially the main difference between both models.
I think that decentralization is the reason why we're all here. We all believe in the power of not having a centralized authority that's maintaining, all of the dollar balances or all of the machine state. The fact that we have technology that can enable that power to be completely distributed amongst a large number of validators, that technology is what is enabling people to now build new applications or people to build new businesses where they can just onboard users. Basically, users already have wallets or are already onboarded into this system, and you can immediately just start interacting with the app and have built-in payment rails and just this built-in financial system. That's the benefit of a decentralized system. And I think it's always, like in my mind, it's always about technology enabling decentralization, and that should always be the core goal. So for Monad, our job is to build new architecture that makes the technology more powerful so that then we can enable a larger degree of users that are using this decentralized system. So yeah, to your point about layer twos, I have nothing against layer twos. I think it's, it's a different model of scaling that is focused on building these trustless bridges between different blockchain environments. But there definitely needs to be a lot more work done on decentralizing layer 2 sequencers. I think it's in a lot of folks' roadmaps, but we don't see a lot of things live right now, and it's still quite a ways away. So I would say that Monad is a very pragmatic approach to getting the most out of the hardware, getting the most out of the SSD, building a database that can take advantage of capabilities of this hardware, so that we can have much higher throughput rather than just relying on, for example, one centralized sequencer that is really high hardware requirements, so that instead anyone can run a node, anyone can have access to that state.
Right. Okay, and then in that line, how does Monad versus Layer 2 impact stakers and validators?
Right. Yeah, I think that it's really great to be here today in front of the broader staking community, because it's really clear that there's so many folks that have put in so much effort into helping to make decentralization pragmatic, to make decentralization possible, and that only comes from having hundreds or thousands of great validator entities that are securing networks. And one big thing is that with layer 2s, because they literally have a centralized sequencer run by generally whoever built that rollup, there's not a role for validators in those systems, and we can't take advantage of all of the work and all of the innovation that's gone into building up amazing validator platforms. So yeah, I think that the layer 1 approach is really about building better technology that can take advantage of all of this work that everyone here in the room has done.
And to wrap up, what are the milestones that we should be expecting from Monad, and when are you planning to launch mainnet?
Yeah, our team is hard at work right now doing some more integration testing with third-party infrastructure providers, indexers, RPCs, things like that. But we're making a ton of progress, and currently have an internal DevNet with about 30 different validator entities running nodes there. So we're progressing toward opening up to a public testnet where anyone can just hit the public RPCs. In the meantime, right now, there's just a lot of testing going on. But I think it's safe to say that we expect the mainnet early next year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Keone.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.